The gloves are off in the war between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, co-stars in the recent film It Ends With Us, who each accuse each other of harassment and retaliation. Lively's team has just filed an amended complaint, not only clarifying certain issues she brought up in her first filing, but now apparently revealing shocking new messages, behind-the-scenes stories, and the impact this whole legal battle has had on her career. We're digging into this full complaint with you right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Well, it is a dramatic new twist in the ongoing feud between It Ends With Us co-stars Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. Lively's attorneys have filed a new Bombshell amended complaint revealing fresh allegations of on-set misconduct, a retaliatory campaign aimed at discrediting her. Key witnesses now, according to Lively, willing to testify against Baldoni and his team. This 137-page filing expands on her claims of harassment and now includes new players added to the case. It just intensifies the drama surrounding this very troubled production. If we look at this in totality, and we're going to break down this full complaint for you so you don't have to do it yourself, I would say the big themes are new responses, new claims, and potentially new corroborating evidence. Let me get into it. Now, if you haven't been following what's been going on here surrounding Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, just buckle up for a second. This all kicked off on December 20th when Blake Lively filed her civil rights complaint with the California Civil Rights Department accusing her co-star and director of It Ends With Us, Justin Baldoni, of serious misconduct, including sexual harassment, creating a hostile work environment, and other boundary violations. And Lively claims that when she raised these concerns, she faced retaliation and a smear campaign designed to damage her career. And of course, she didn't just go after Baldoni. She also named his production company, Wayfarer Studios, along with the CEO, Jamie Heath, Baldoni's former publicist, Jennifer Abel, his crisis manager, Melissa Nathan. And the very next day, the New York Times joined the fray because they dropped a bombshell article titled "We Can Bury Anyone Inside a Hollywood Smear Machine," which revealed text messages that Lively's team claims they got through a subpoena that apparently shows how deep this alleged smear campaign against her really ran. Baldoni, though, he fought back. He struck back in more ways than ever. On New Year's Eve, he fired back against the New York Times, filing a $250 million defamation lawsuit against the outlet and accusing them of publishing a misleading report with cherry-picked messages that only supported Lively's version of events. In his filing, Baldoni claimed that Lively's team was actually behind a smear campaign against him by weaponizing her claims to destroy his reputation and career. And he took a whole step further when on January 16th, he countersued Lively and her husband Ryan Reynolds, along with Lively's publicist Leslie Sloan, accusing them of orchestrating a campaign and also claiming that Lively hijacked his film in a bid to control his narrative. Hey, quick sidebar from Sidebar for a second. So there are recent allegations against the multi-billion-dollar video game industry, and they claim that video games are engineered for addiction. Yeah, these claims include trying to make sense of the hold that video games seem to have over people where they just can't put the controller down. Every win triggers a hit of dopamine that creates a cycle of compulsion that disrupts daily life and harms mental health. But our legal sponsors are taking on this industry that has at many times allegedly put profit over safety, and they're working to potentially get compensation for all of those impacted. So if you or a loved one have suffered physical or mental health issues due to video games, then visit vgclaims.com/sidebar to answer less than 10 questions and check your eligibility to file a claim. So now you fast forward to the end of January, and Baldoni's team took their claims even further and launched a website dedicated to this legal fight. That website, lawsuitinfo.com, includes documents related to his lawsuit, including an amended complaint, a timeline of events, according to him, dating back to 2019, related to the making of It Ends With Us. Again, never before seen messages were published. But of course, this only added more fuel to the fire. Her team ended up going to the court. There was even a suggestion about maybe a protective order needed to be put in place, specifically referring to Brian Friedman, Baldoni's lawyer. There was an accusation that he might be violating the rules of professional conduct here by making statements outside that could maybe unfairly prejudice a jury. Now, the two sides ended up meeting in court for the first time on February 3rd for a pretrial hearing. And basically, in the end, the judge said, don't make any comments either side that could affect this case in a negative way, that could prejudice this case, that could ultimately taint a future jury. Just be careful. Now, lawyers for Blake Lively have just submitted an amended complaint. That is what we're going to break down for you. Again, over 130 pages long. Now, one of the first things that we noticed about this lawsuit is that it adds more defendants, namely Jed Wallace and his crisis management company, Street Relations, Inc. Now, we have done separate episodes of Sidebar about who Jed Wallace is and how he got involved in this whole legal saga. You can check out those episodes on Law&Crime's YouTube channel. But basically, Lively claims that Wallace was involved in the social media campaign to paint her in a bad light following the premiere of It Ends With Us. Now, here's what happened. Lively had originally named him in her complaint with the California Civil Rights Department, which is a precursor to filing a lawsuit. But when she did file her official complaint in federal court, Wallace wasn't named as a defendant. And that's when he ended up filing his own lawsuit against her, saying, Lively name-dropping me ruined my reputation and ruined my company's reputation. But now he has officially been named in this amended complaint. He is the defendant in this action. And actually, by the way, it's interesting because Lively now claims that in this amended complaint, this is new information, that she tried to depose Wallace, but according to her, he allegedly evaded and obstructed her efforts to do so. And then she accuses his lawyers of misrepresenting what happened too. You probably could dedicate a whole Sidebar episode to that. Maybe actually we will. But anyway, also new, there are more causes of action in this amended complaint. The first lawsuit had 13 claims. This one has added 2, defamation and defamation per se, plus civil conspiracy. Big difference between defamation. Defamation per se is they both allege false statements that were made to another. And if you're dealing with a public person like a celebrity, you need to show actual malice, that you knew they were false or you acted with reckless disregard for the truth. But per se is basically saying the statements are so bad on their face, you don't even need to show how they're harmful to your reputation. It's clear. Civil conspiracy is a type of collusion involving an agreement between 2 or more parties to deprive a third party, of legal rights or deceive a third party to obtain an illegal objective. Now, Justin Baldoni's lawyer, Brian Friedman, told TMZ that this suit is, quote, filled with unsubstantial hearsay of unnamed persons who are clearly no longer willing to come forward to publicly support her claims. He goes on to say that Baldoni and Wayfair have been transparent in providing receipts, real-time documents, and video showing a completely different story than what has been manipulated and cherry-picked to the media. He also told TMZ, since documents do not lie and people do, the upcoming depositions of those who initially supported Miss Lively's false claims and those who are witnesses to her own behavior will be enlightening. What is truly uncomfortable here is Miss Lively's lack of actual evidence. Now, he might be saying that because if you look at her complaint, unlike Baldoni's, there seems to be maybe less text messages to document certain conversations, but she's still alleging it nonetheless. And with that in mind, let's dig into this complaint. So, Lively starts off by pointing out that the efforts that Baldoni has made in recent years to present himself as a supporter of feminist causes maybe doesn't add up. And I want to read you through a portion of the first few pages because it kind of gives you a good idea of what exactly Lively is accusing Baldoni of doing. The complaint reads, for years prior to the release of the film, Mr. Baldoni portrayed himself as a leader of the male feminist movement in writing books, hosting podcasts, and holding TED Talks on the topic. In reality, however, Mr. Baldoni's public persona is a stark contrast to his private behavior, which is replete with hypocrisy, misogyny, and retaliation. In public, Mr. Baldoni gave the appearance of taking responsibility for the fact that he had unconsciously been hurting and silencing the women in his life and implored men to be man enough to shut the hell up and listen to women. At his own moment of truth, when forced to confront women he had made uncomfortable on his own set, he trivialized their concerns and failed to take accountability for the effects of his behavior, whether intended or not. And when faced with the predictable consequences of having created a toxic set, namely that the cast did not want to appear alongside him in public rather than holding himself accountable, Mr. Baldoni hid behind his billionaire friend and retained publicists, crisis managers, digital media strategists, and litigators to mount a sophisticated and well-funded retaliation campaign that sought to bury and destroy anyone that challenged his brand. That campaign has succeeded beyond Mr. Baldoni's wildest expectations. The defendant's actions have created such a toxic climate of online vitriol against Miss Lively, her family, other members of the cast, and various fact witnesses that all of the above have received disturbing threats. One fact witness known to publicly support Miss Lively recently received a written threat indicating that the witness's family would be sexually assaulted and killed unless the witness agreed to make a statement and give the truth. This type of climate was the predictable, if not inevitable, result of the retaliatory campaign launched by the Baldoni Wayfair parties both before and after the litigation began. So, at multiple points in this complaint, Lively talks about other female cast members who were apparently uncomfortable with Baldoni's alleged actions on set. And that is key. Something that was alleged in the first complaint, but really expanded upon here. In other words, it's not just Lively who is prepared to speak out and accuse and possibly testify against Baldoni, but possibly others. Quote, this amended complaint does not refer to certain witnesses by name, nor does it provide screenshots of their text messages. By the way, this is something that Friedman had highlighted, the lack of text messages, but I guess if you're Blake Lively, you could be saying I'm trying to protect the privacy of these people. But she goes on to say, importantly, however, these witnesses have given Miss Lively permission to share the substance of their communications in this amended complaint as contained therein, and they will testify and produce responsive documents in the discovery process, meaning at this stage she's not going to produce these text messages. Miss Lively was not the only one who was uncomfortable on set, and Mr. Baldoni and Wayfarer knew it. The defendant's false narrative crumbles under the indisputable truth that Miss Lively was not alone in complaining about Mr. Baldoni and raised her concerns contemporaneously as they arose in 2023, not in connection with some imagined power play for control of the film in 2024. The experiences of Miss Lively and others were documented at the time they occurred starting in May of 2023. Importantly, and contrary to the entire narrative defendants have invented, Mr. Baldoni acknowledged the complaints in writing at the time. He knew that women, other than Miss Lively, also were uncomfortable and had complained about his behavior. So the complaint highlighted messages that Lively apparently shared with other women with whom she commiserated about the alleged toxic set not long after filming reportedly got underway. For example, it reads, quote, on May 24th, 2023, Miss Lively confided in a text to a woman who is a mutual friend of Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath, I was going to invite you to set tomorrow. These people, whoa. It's like HR nuts today, the both of them. I wasn't expecting that turn. I mean, it's been present, but today I came home and cried. Further in the exchange, Miss Lively describes Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath as creeps. Like, keep your hormones to yourselves. This is not mine. I don't want it. I don't want your gaze or words or tongue or videos of your naked wife. Yeah, it's shocking. Clowns. Quote, a few days later on May 26, 2023, Miss Lively reported her concerns regarding unwelcome and inappropriate behavior by Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath, the chief executive officer of Wayfair and producer of the film, to Sony employee Angie Gianetti, the film's representative for its distributor Sony Pictures Entertainment. Over the following 3 days in May of 2023, another female cast member reported her own concerns regarding Mr. Baldoni's unwelcome behavior to both Miss Gianetti and one of the film's producers. Now, this is critical to Lively's claim, the idea that she wasn't the only person on the set feeling uncomfortable or that she was being targeted, that other actresses or other people said that they had some of the same issues. Quote, on June 1st, 2023, Mr. Baldoni responded to that female cast member in writing, acknowledging that he was aware of her concerns and that adjustments would be made. Notwithstanding that promise, Wayfair took no actions to investigate this reported conduct, nor did it implement any protections at that time. Just 1 week later, on June 8, 2023, the same female cast member told Miss Lively about her growing concerns with the conditions on set and that she found it difficult to talk to Mr. Baldoni. Miss Lively responded that, I know I find it really hard to speak to him. I try to cover it with busyness, but not sure that covers what's going on. Later, another female cast member confided to Miss Lively that she too felt uncomfortable on set. All of this occurred and was documented in writing almost 1 year before the editing of the film began. If there is that documentation and can be shown, that could be quite powerful. Or how about this? Miss Lively shared that she needed to tread carefully to, quote, salvage some degree of chemistry and camaraderie with Justin, who's not only my director, but love interest, and we're not even a third of the way done. The two women then recounted their discomfort with their experiences with Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath, including one incident in which Mr. Baldoni secretly recorded them, and another in which he made an unwelcome remark about the female cast member's wardrobe. By the way, if there's a recording and that can be produced during the course of discovery, again, compelling evidence. It goes on to say, Miss Lively noted that Mr. Baldoni once asked her if he crossed a line, and when she said yes, he made a joke that he must have missed the sexual harassment meeting. And then there's this, quote, Miss Lively and the female cast member discussed various examples of their uncomfortable and inappropriate interactions with Mr. Baldoni, and on May 28, 2023, Miss Lively explained that her concerns were not just with Mr. Baldoni's behavior, but the way that Mr. Baldoni behaved after being confronted with his line-crossing behavior. He keeps referencing it, or disconnects entirely, or gets snippy and impatient as a director. He was so huffy about the sexy thing, I felt awful for saying something. Again, big new accusations in this complaint. Now, I also said that this amended complaint is about responses, and I think we're going to probably do this more in a future Sidebar episode, but Lively responds many times to Baldoni's explanations, his defenses. For example, do you remember when she says that Baldoni and Heath would invade her space, that they would come into her trailer unannounced, right? And he came forward and said, look, that's not true. She invited me while she was breastfeeding, right? Well, she responds to that in this complaint. Here's an example. Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath both showed a shocking lack of boundaries by invading her personal space when she was undressed and vulnerable. Defendants have claimed that these intrusions were Miss Lively's fault because she texted Mr. Baldoni on one occasion that she was, quote, just pumping in my trailer if you want to work out our lines. This misunderstands the difference between a woman pumping on her own terms, having taken the necessary steps to make herself comfortable, covering herself and ensuring the conditions are appropriate for the task, and walking in on someone without notice or permission while they're breastfeeding or otherwise in a state of partial undress. Now, let me go back to the timeline here. So many of Hollywood's writers, they went on strike in 2023 as part of a labor dispute. And that impacted a lot of productions, including It Ends With Us. And when the strikes ended and everyone was prepared to get back to work at the start of 2024, Lively had asked for certain protections for herself and others on the set. And the amended complaint reads, before returning to production following the guild strikes, based on Wayfarer's complete failure to investigate or address any of the complaints conveyed by Miss Lively and others, Miss Lively decided to speak up and require that Sony and Wayfarer agree to a set of protections to ensure a safe set for all of the cast and crew. Now, the protections to return production, they were attached as an exhibit. We've talked about these before. They include guidelines like there is to be no spontaneous improvising of any scenes involving physical touching, simulated sex, or nudity. But the last item in the document says that the production, quote, hold an all-hands in-person meeting before production resumes, which will include the director, all producers, the Sony representatives, the newly engaged third-party producer, BL, Blake Lively, and Blake Lively's designated representatives to confirm and approve a plan for implementation of the above that will be adhered to for the physical and emotional safety of BL, her employees, and all the cast and crew moving forward. And that meeting was apparently held in January of 2024 and included Lively and her representative, who was her actor husband, Ryan Reynolds. He's a defendant in Justin Baldoni's lawsuit. And Baldoni was there, Heath was there, the Sony representative, Angie Gianetti, was there, Todd Black, the producer, brought in to help oversee everything. The complaint says, importantly, none of the requested protections were tied in any way to Miss Lively's creative input in the film and were made months before any discussions regarding the cut of the film. At that moment in time, with the completion of the film uncertain, Miss Lively did not request, nor did she receive any creative rights, editing rights, credits, or any other role on the film beyond her roles as an actress and executive producer. The notion that she did all of this as some sort of Byzantine plot to take control of the movie at some future point, which she did not do in any event, is absurd, and there is not a shred of evidence to support it. That is important too. That's an important response because Baldoni has alleged that Lively bullied her way into taking control over the film and boxed him out, that she used her star power and the power of her husband, Ryan Reynolds, and even her friendship with mega celebrity Taylor Swift to do that. Now, Lively claims in this amended complaint that all of those accusations are not only inaccurate, but they're also irrelevant and a red herring to what really matters here, her allegations of sexual harassment and misconduct. Now, one of the things that's been talked about a lot in connection with this litigation is the marketing of the film. The official marketing plan was included as another exhibit to the lawsuit. And it says, focus more on Lily's strength and resilience as opposed to describing the film as a story about domestic violence. Empowerment is not just about standing up to adversity, but also about having the power to overcome within oneself and grow from it and developing agency to shape the future. and, quote, avoid talking about the film that makes it feel sad or heavy. It's a story of hope. Now, according to Blake Lively, Baldoni started to deviate from that agreed-upon plan, despite the fact that Wayfair Studios had approved it. The lawsuit says what the public also did not know was that this was the beginning of a multi-tiered plan that Mr. Baldoni and his team described as social manipulation designed to destroy Miss Lively's reputation. That plan was backed by virtually unlimited resources. Wayfair's co-founder, co-chairman, and leading financier is multi-billionaire Steve Sarowitz, who divulged to a witness at the film's New York premiere on August 6, 2024, that he was prepared to spend $100 million to ruin the lives of Miss Lively and her family. By the way, before I get into the footnote of this, the reason this is all important is because Blake Lively has been criticized about promoting the film in a way that didn't appreciate the serious nature, the serious undertones of it. She's been accused of being tone deaf, but she's saying that was the marketing plan. I did what the marketing plan was supposed to be. But going back to Sarowitz for a second, so that part of the complaint includes a footnote, and it reads this. When asked about this comment, Mr. Sarowitz's counsel confirmed that his client is prepared to spend whatever necessary to defend Baldoni, Wayfair Studios, and himself. And the complaint continues with a very strange comment allegedly made by Sarowitz. Quote, later in August of 2024, even though the film had turned out very well and Wayfair had made a lot of money, Mr. Sarowitz confessed to another witness, an individual who was working with Wayfair on an unrelated project, that if Miss Lively or Mr. Reynolds ever cross the line ever, then I will go after them. He declared, I will protect the studio like Israel protected itself from Hamas. There were 39,000 dead bodies. There will be 2 dead bodies when I'm done. Minimum. Not dead, but you're dead to me. So that kind of dead. But dead to a lot of people if they ever get me to that point. Then I'll make it worth their while because I'm going to spend a lot of money to make sure the studio is protected. Wow. Again, an allegation, but what an allegation nonetheless. Now, when the waves of bad press started to hit after the film was released, there was a lot of pressure, apparently, for Wayfair Studios to release a statement. According to this amended complaint, rather than doing so, Ms. Nathan advised that issuing such a statement would be a career killer for Mr. Baldoni, who she urged to lawyer up and fight. Again, this is his crisis management expert. This is a defendant being accused by Blake Lively of being a part of this smear campaign or alleged smear campaign. And then this goes into the whole discussion about social manipulation and the text messages for back and forth and how there was this effort to conceal the harassment, and it was all a retaliation campaign and a smear campaign, and how this destroyed Blake Lively's image. It harmed her businesses. It caused her emotional harm. And it talks about the social media posts. We've talked about astroturfing. We talked about this in a previous sidebar, but let me just go back to something else that's mentioned in this amended complaint, where it says, they admitted that within hours of laying out their plan, they started to see a shift on social due largely to Jed, meaning Jed Wallace, and his team's efforts to shift the narrative. And they did all this despite the knowledge that Miss Lively, quote, genuinely believes she's right and that all of this is unjust. And here the lawsuit includes a text message exchange purportedly between Baldoni and Nathan. And in it, Baldoni says, yeah, I just know her personality, and this is the kind of person that genuinely believes she's right and that all of this is unjust. And the other person responds, she fully does. I know it. I think this is Miss Nathan who said this back. And Baldoni responds, so these people seek justice at any cost. That's why I just have a hard time believing she's done, but trusting you and grateful for you. And again, the person purportedly, Miss Nathan, responds, she looks abominable. If she does anything against you, she knows it. Now, that becomes important for the defamation analysis because Lively argues that alleged statements made by Baldoni's attorney, Brian Friedman, in the media that Lively made up all the sexual harassment claims, that him doing this on behalf of his clients, this is defamation, that they knew such statements about Blake Lively were false, that they acted with actual malice because they never doubted the sincerity of Blake Lively's beliefs. They're highlighting that message from Justin Baldoni, where he seems to be saying that Blake Lively is the kind of person that genuinely believes she's right and that all of this is unjust. The complaint continues talking about the retaliation and smear campaign claim where it says, quote, despite all of this, they claim their plan was never implemented and somehow the universe simply organically provided them with the exact result they planned for at the exact time they wanted it using the exact narratives they developed. This is in relation and in response to Baldoni's claim that, look, we were never behind a smear campaign. All the negative press that Blake Lively received, that was her own doing. It happened organically. Blake Lively says, how coincidental. I don't believe it. Quote, the problem for defendants is that they put their plan for an untraceable campaign in writing, and the evidence shows them commenting on the success of their plan as it unfolded. There's two parts here, right? There's the retaliation campaign and there's the allegations of sexual harassment. Just going back to the allegations of sexual harassment for a second. So Lively addresses several issues that she encountered on set, as mentioned, by the way, in her prior complaint. Baldoni allegedly adding graphic content and scenes without her knowledge or consent, including an orgasm scene. There was also an allegation that during a car ride, Baldoni allegedly admitted to her, did I always ask for consent? No. Did I always listen when they said no? No. Now, Lively also alleges that there really wasn't a process to file any sort of official HR complaint with Wayfair about the alleged misconduct, and toward the beginning of filming in May of 2023, Lively reportedly tried to talk to the Sony representative about it, right, the distributor of the film. Quote, although she was sympathetic, Ms. Gianetti told Ms. Lively that Sony, as the distributor of the film, was not empowered to oversee physical production, which included Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath's behavior on set, and that such concerns must be raised with Wayfair, the studio responsible for the production. Ms. Lively was concerned with this response because Mr. Baldoni and Mr. Heath were the chairman and CEO of Wayfair, and Mr. Baldoni was the director of the film. Ms. Lively did not believe that either Mr. Baldoni or Mr. Heath would investigate their own alleged misconduct, and that disbelief was proven by subsequent events. And the lawsuit does reveal that Wayfair started an investigation after Lively filed her complaint with the California board, as well as her federal lawsuit. This is, again, according to Blake Lively's narrative. And according to the complaint, the investigators confirmed things like Wayfair controlled the investigation budget and the documents and information that the investigators would receive, that the investigation would be attorney-client privileged, and that as the holder of the attorney-client privilege, Wayfair would have the right to all of the investigators' interview notes, memoranda, determinations, and conclusions, which Wayfair could keep completely secret if it chose to do so. So essentially a conflict of interest here. Quote, yet the investigators conceded that they would not be making any recommendations or corrective actions that Wayfair should take based on the investigation findings, which they described as beyond the scope of their work for Wayfair. It would solely be up to Wayfair to decide what to do, if anything. Wayfair's belated launch of an investigation in 2025 is a damning admission of Wayfair's failure to investigate events that were reported to Wayfair in 2023. And when it comes to the allegation, again, that Lively took over the film, insisting things be changed, making her own edits, as I mentioned, she basically says it's not relevant, it's a red herring, but then says this: before Miss Lively sued, Mr. Baldoni and the Wayfair parties were perfectly happy to exploit Miss Lively's star power as well as her access to A-level filmmakers, editors, and more. And notwithstanding their complaints today that Miss Lively supposedly seized control of Mr. Baldoni's film, that did not stop Mr. Baldoni from proudly marketing the film as his work on release. Indeed, although Mr. Baldoni privately confessed that he didn't even see the final cut of the film until the premiere, he repeatedly and publicly took credit for the film, while Miss Lively generally downplayed her contributions. And Lively claims that while Baldoni was allegedly participating in a massive campaign to shame her, embarrass her, discredit her, she was doing the opposite. Quote, meanwhile, Miss Lively neither publicly commented nor directed any of her representatives to comment to or engage with the print media, social media, or otherwise about the hostile work environment Mr. Baldoni, Mr. Heath, and Wayfair created. Indeed, throughout the time period discussed herein, Miss Lively never provided her publicist with details about the hostile work environment that she, alongside the other cast members and crew, had experienced. Moreover, Miss Lively expressly instructed her publicist, Leslie Sloan, not to engage with press inquiries, including ones regarding the on-set behavior of Mr. Baldoni, Mr. Heath, or Wayfair. In other words, Miss Lively's instructions to her publicist were the opposite of a smear or exposing him, even while she believed he was behind the attacks on her. Now, Leslie Sloan, Lively's publicist, is included in Baldoni's suit against Blake Lively and her husband, Ryan Reynolds. She is named as a defendant, and her company, Vision PR, is also named. But then it talks about Ryan Reynolds. Quote, Mr. Reynolds confirmed that instruction to Miss Lively's publicist on August 13th and again on August 29th, directing her to continue to, quote, remain quiet and not do anything to shape any stories, whether positive or negative, reiterating an instruction that both he and Miss Lively had given her verbally at the premiere of the film in Denmark on August 9th to, quote, not talk to anyone about any of the attacks on Blake. And by the way, talking about a lack of text messages in this complaint, this is actually referenced in a text message embedded in this amended complaint. This appears to be all new information. And Lively also reiterated in the lawsuit that Sony seemed more concerned with the profits and success of the film than what was going on behind the scenes. Quote, as this onslaught continued, Miss Lively was deeply disappointed that neither Wayfair nor Sony had stepped in to correct the record. On September 4th, 2024, she received a text from a Sony executive checking in on her and asking how she was doing. Miss Lively responded, I'm not in a good place. This has been deeply painful and I feel so hung out to dry. From production to this PR crisis, no one stepped forward. I wish so much that I was okay, but I'm really not. And that executive apparently said, I know it's been hard and horrendously unfair, and I hope soon you can better take in the incredible film you made that audiences love around the world. It's so rare this happens, and you did that. You also will have $330 million worth of eyeballs watching a film about domestic violence that is so important and affected so many lives for the better. That's because of you. Now, talking about harm, talking about what happened, the lawsuit includes analytics that they say prove that positive press for Blake Lively absolutely plummeted. Again, they're blaming Justin Baldoni and his team for this. And this suit includes a chart where you can apparently see the huge dip in the red. But this lawsuit, this amended complaint, appears to provide new examples. Quote, online vitriol towards Miss Lively has continued unabated. For example, on January 31st, 2025, Miss Lively's personal Instagram, on which she has nearly 45 million followers, was inundated with pornographic content tagging her account profile handle. Then the lawsuit talks about posts on Betty Booze's social media. This is Blake Lively's company. And it includes the following messages. Cancel Blake. Boycott this crap. At Betty Booze, stunned by the greed and utter lack of human decency. Yes? Quote, hashtag Team Justin. And Lively claims she has lost out on so many opportunities in her acting career as well as her own lifestyle businesses because of the drama surrounding the film and this legal saga. Quote, the effects on Miss Lively's professional life were immediate and substantial. Given the ongoing nature of the campaign and the associated negative public sentiment, Miss Lively did not believe she could proceed with public appearances or events without being forced to openly discuss what happened on set. For example, Miss Lively canceled a critical Target corporate event for her hair care company and felt compelled to decline an invitation to host the premiere episode of the 50th anniversary season of Saturday Night Live in September 2024. She has since turned down other acting and directing opportunities as a result of feeling harassed and fearful of further attacks on herself, her family, and her colleagues. She has also canceled multiple appearances on behalf of her businesses since December of 2024 because of the constant online vitriol directed at her brands. And she also claims that she suffered personally too. The emotional impact on Miss Lively has been extreme, not only affecting her but her family, including her husband and 4 children. There are days when she has struggled to get out of bed, and she frequently chooses not to venture outside in public. While she has fought to maintain her personal life and business interests behind closed doors, she has suffered from grief, fear, trauma, and extreme anxiety. She has also been experiencing repeated and painful physical symptoms as a result of this experience. Mr. Reynolds, too, has been affected mentally, physically, and professionally by his wife's and children's pain. Worst of all, however, has been the impact on their young children, who have been traumatized and emotionally uprooted in ways that have substantially impacted their well-being. So going back to those 15 causes of action, let me quickly run through them with you. Sexual harassment, retaliation in violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Sexual harassment in violation of FEHA, this is California's Fair Employment and Housing Act. Retaliation in violation of FEHA. Retaliation in violation of the California Labor Code. Failure to investigate, prevent, and/or remedy harassment in violation of FEHA, aiding and abetting harassment and retaliation in violation of FEHA, breach of contract, actor loan-out agreement, breach of contract, contract writer agreement, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress, false light, invasion of privacy, publicity that puts a person in an untrue light and is highly offensive, sexual harassment in violation of California Civil Code, defamation, defamation per se, and civil conspiracy. Now, one more thing before I let you guys go. You may know that we did a prior sidebar on the battle over subpoenas in this case. Lively's side had planned to issue subpoenas to certain carriers, potentially for call logs and things like that. Really, it's involving the parties or the associated parties in this case. Baldoni's side said these subpoenas were way too broad. They basically moved to quash or toss out the subpoenas. And there was a difference in opinion about whether or not both sides met in good faith to work these issues out. Well, the court just issued an order, and it says the parties, Baldoni and Lively's side, more specifically their attorneys, are ordered to meet and confer and try to work all of this out, and then report back to the court on Monday, February 24th, 2025, and tell the court whether there's any dispute that still exists here. But in the meantime, Blake Lively can't enforce the subpoenas while this motion is pending. Wow, a lot, I know. We will continue to follow this case for you right here on Sidebar, but that is all we have for you right now. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.